Yep.
Double figures, Tom. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Episode 10. Wow, where's the time gone? That's flown by.
It has absolutely.
Thanks to our viewers who tune in regularly, and do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Do leave us some comments. We've had one or two recently, which has been lovely to see. But let us know what you think once you've seen things. If you have views and opinions, do share.
Absolutely share. And let's start off with a topic that dominated the news in the latter end of the last week and over the weekend. Mr. Matthew Hancock, and then his replacement by Mr. Javid. Oh dear, where do we go from here, Tom? Where do we go from here? Back to the lake, I fear.
Extraordinary, isn't it? Body bag Boris refused to sack homicide Hancock, despite clearly lying to the Commons, lying to Hancock. This is lying to the Commons, lying to his cabinet colleagues, lying to the public,
lying to his wife, lying to his wife,
giving crony contracts to his local pub landlord and neighbour and friend, and being in charge of our Department of Health at a time of the pandemic when our response has by any measure been truly appalling, and we've had around 150,000 deaths, one of the worst rates in the world. And he doesn't get sacked for any of that, even though Johnson called him effing hopeless back at the start of the pandemic. He doesn't get sacked for any of that. He gets sacked for an affair. He doesn't get sacked. Johnson never sacks him, and he resigns over a tawdry affair. Very, very sad state of affairs.
Very sad state of affairs, yeah, absolutely. And he was Secretary of State for the Department of Health, and he was giving his lover, a bit on the side, 10 times the amount of taxpayers' money than student nurses were getting. And this makes you want to, I don't know what it makes you want to do, to be honest. Just there's so many people out there who, so what? And then you've got Boris Johnson saying, it's just a Westminster bubble. Nobody's really interested. Nobody's really interested in corruption and lies and criminals, deceit, and moving money off into foreign bank accounts that the taxpayer has earned honestly. No, nobody's interested in that at all. That's UK 2021. We're all nihilists now.
Her brother runs a company that's involved with healthcare in some way, and was a recipient of a NHS contract. Details yet to follow, I'm sure. Hopefully, about that contract and how it was obtained, how it was awarded.
And apparently now the people in charge of CCTV are from Porton Down.
Really?
So there's now they're trying to finger it and pass up the responsibility onto the dark clandestine shadows that hover within the belly of the UK PLC.
But so they're doing a Trump. They're doing a Trump thing there, Jace. You get caught with your pants down. You get caught doing something illegal, unlawful, appalling, and you blame the whistleblowers, or you blame the people that have the leakers, the ones that released the CCTV or brought it to light. Without you don't show any sort of sense of remorse or accountability or anything. You just go after the people that brought it to the public's attention.
Yeah,
typical Trump tactic, and blaming the deep state.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not us that are acting unlawfully. It's the ones that let you know that are the problem.
Yes, no, exactly. And again, millions of people will fall for it, as they always have. But I guess for the moment, Matthew Hancock is the past, and the present is Sajid Javid, and he doesn't exactly bring baggage to the job that we can stand back and applaud and believe to be credible and virtuous. He is as aligned with corruption and deceit as any of them. In fact, if you look at him and Rishi Sunak in terms of the role that they played in selling derivatives and getting extremely wealthy off the back of the 2008 collapse, it's frightening. And even the Daily Mail, I mean, I'll bring the article up, but even the Daily Mail, who aren't well known for, you know, their tactics of exposing Conservatives, unless it's at a time when they think that they can do it without causing too much political damage. But even they were right at the heart of, back in 2014, of exposing him. And it's. I mean, I'll just read through a bit of the article, just a clip of the article. This gives you some sense. It's suspected that Javid was working on the controversial products that were behind the financial crisis during the 6 years he spent at Deutsche Bank in London. A former colleague of Javid said he was astonished at how Javid had been spinning his banking career as if he was some sort of sober investment banker, and revealed that Javid was actually a structured credit trader, and that he was in fact at the heart of the business that precipitated the financial crisis. An ex-Deutsche Bank member reported that shortly before the crisis, all the profit and losses was taken up front and bonuses paid on it. So that suggests that they knew something horrific was coming, and yet they didn't give a stuff about anybody apart from their own bank accounts. Earlier this year, in August, John McDonnell accused Javid of some of the worst successes of the casino economy during his time as a banker, and said that Javid had questions to answer over a tax avoidance scheme used by Deutsche Bank, and that he should publish his tax returns. In a letter to the PM, McDonnell said that Javid had been selling collateralized debt obligations, a complex financial product largely attributed with playing a key role in the 2008 financial crash. It will be not lost on those that have suffered the consequences of the last 9 years of austerity following the 2008 financial crisis, that the newly appointed Chancellor profited from the greed that contributed to it. So, how many people do you think know this, Tom? And how many people, having been told it, then understand it enough to actually care about it enough when it comes to voting? Because I think that's a big question we need to be asking. We can reveal as much as we want, but if people simply look at that information and think, that isn't something I want to know, and it's certainly not something that's going to play a dominant role in my democratic participation, what's the point?
Yeah. I'd say a large proportion of the population, myself included, don't fully understand things like how financial crashes come to pass. What people should know, though, is that it's mostly the result of greedy bankers, exactly people like Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak, who could be classed as greedy bankers, greedy investment bankers, who create financial products which lead to problems in the global financial system and markets, and ultimately in 2008 created the worst, one of the worst global financial crashes in history. And that article was obviously written in 2017, but we've now seen 11 years of austerity. So these people creating these financial derivatives, selling them, knowing that they're worthless, causing a global financial crash, costing trillions and trillions of pounds, leading to not just our government, but a number of other right-wing governments across the world implementing years and years, over a decade of austerity measures. It actually means that, them playing around with, as John McDonnell said, the casino economy, and profiting massively. I mean, Javid was rumoured to have personally got about 150 million pounds when he, at the time he left Deutsche Bank. And what that means for ordinary people is 11 years of frozen wages, 11 years of cuts to public services, 11 years of lack of funding for schools, for hospitals, healthcare, for local authority services that have been decimated in the last 10, 11 years. And of course, all of that is ideological. It doesn't have to happen that way. But the the Conservatives and other right-wing governments in a number of countries have used the financial crash as an excuse to attack public services, because they don't believe in them ideologically. They believe in free markets and privatized profit-making companies running everything. They don't believe in the public good. They don't believe in public services that provide public goods that improve the quality of people's lives in all sorts of ways, but don't make profit for any of their rich mates. They don't believe in that. So these people now, we've got two of them now high up in our government. One's Chancellor, one's Minister for Health, that caused the global financial, that were involved in, causing it, the global financial crash, and then, a decade of our society getting worse and worse and worse for ordinary people. And these are the people in charge now. It's scary, shocking.
Yeah, and I think that takes us very nicely into the next topic, which was obviously.
Before we move on, Jay, sorry. Before we move on, just a quick thing. I believe you wasn't Javid also involved in getting paid large amounts of money for something that related to selling health-based products? I think you knew something around that.
I'm not sure about the detail. I know that he, once he left his position as Chancellor, he went straight back into the private sector and was earning extraordinary amounts of money, per hour. And again, if you look at the way in which the government have ensured that nurses aren't likely to get a pay rise above 1%, I think there were people in the Commons who were asking him directly, how is it he can justify, on the one hand, making so much money in the private sector, being away from politics for that length of time, and then coming back into politics and picking up the reins of like you said before, of an ideology which effectively seeks to crush those people in the public services, whilst at the same time going out and feathering their own nests at our expense. As I say, in terms of specific health products, I'm not sure of that, but it does lead us really, really nicely into the next topic, which is an interview you did with a local GP, Dr. Jon Orrell. And obviously this is leading up to, on Saturday, on Saturday's the demonstration, but obviously on the 8th of July, which is next week, it's the 73rd anniversary of the formation of the NHS in 1948. And something that's become, as some people has become, I think Nigel Lawson called the NHS it's the closest thing to religion that the UK population have. And rightly so, even though Nigel Lawson was certainly part of the doctrinaire ideological assault in which he was looking seriously into trying to create an insurance-based privatised healthcare system back in the 1980s, until he was warned that it would be an electoral suicide. But so what I think they've decided since that point is to do the piecemeal approach, slowly catch approach, in which they gradually sell off parts of the National Health Service, but in such a way as the population and the voting public don't really see it. So at the end of the day, they'll be able to turn around and say, oh, look, you're getting all these services and you're complaining, or you're saying how wonderful it is, and most of your GP surgeries are now owned by American insurance companies.
And John talks about this in the interview, and so it was great to have a chance to talk with John. And for anyone who values our NHS, cares about the future of NHS, and having a free at the point of delivery NHS service available to you and your families in the future, this interview is a must watch. So over to this chat with John. Hi, Jon Orrell. Welcome to 10 by 6.
Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, lovely to see you. For viewers that aren't aware, Jon Orrell is a Weymouth GP and also a Dorset councillor for the Green Party. And given that it's the 73rd birthday of the NHS in the next week, with lots of people demonstrating to save our NHS over this weekend, we thought it would be a great time to ask Jon to come on and talk about the NHS, what's happened in the recent past with the NHS, and his views on how things are now and for the future. So with that in mind, Jon, people say that the NHS is sort of facing an unprecedented level of threat through privatisation and other things. Can you give us your views on how that manifests itself, how you see that threat? What form does that take?
Well, it's a very real threat. The NHS has been like the jewel in the crown of the post-war settlement. Our forefathers fought right-wing fascists on the continent and won, and they did it on the basis of this. This is what inspired them, the Beveridge Report, which set forth a lovely vision of a England, a Britain free from want, squalor, ignorance, idleness, and disease. And that's what they did. They were bankrupt, but they did it. They got houses, they got free education, and they got the NHS. And gradually, since Thatcher, the rise of personal greed, we've seen them whittled away. We've lost our council housing. We're having to pay for our university education. They've privatised all the utilities, but the NHS is loved by the people, so they can't get rid of it in one go. We've seen that in cabinet papers released from the 70s. They realised it was too difficult, so what they do is they whittle away at it. Their face will say, "It's safe with us." Every election campaign, you'll see the smooth words, but don't watch the lips. You watch the hands. You see what they're doing. And what they do is relentlessly chip away. Just little bits go here and there. Blood contracts, pathology services, everything is. So it's done on the sly. But if you corner them, they'll deny it. But watch what they do.
Yeah, it's described as death by 1,000 cuts, isn't it? And talking of which, I mean, that leads me on to ask about cuts. I mean, what I think we've seen is probably what could be described as a deliberate underfunding and cuts made to the NHS over the last 11 years of Conservative government. We've seen, considerable reductions in the number of doctors, nurses, hospital beds, other services. What do you think is the result of those cuts? How has that affected, patients?
Well, it's affected us badly. I've been working in the NHS now for 35 years. And I've seen what happens when the Conservatives get in power and cut the funding. So my early years were under Thatcher and Major, and the funding was cut. And I saw waiting lists rise to 2 years. And then New Labour, for all its faults, which there are several, but one of the things they got right was the funding of the NHS. And we got us back up to almost European levels. And the waiting lists came down to 2 weeks by the time they left power. Now, 12 of Conservative rule, we see the waiting list rise and rise. And we can't blame it on coronavirus. This was happening long before. And it's again, they'll put their hands on their heart and say we're increasing funding. They don't. They're putting in, the NHS needs about 4% a year. And the reason it needs that is because of medical advances. It's not like we're running a bookshop here where the prices are fixed. We get new immunotherapy, great new cancer treatments, like the vaccine for coronavirus. It all costs money. So the medical inflation is 4 to 5%. And if they put in 1 to 2%, in effect, we have a cut. So what we see over the last 10 years is waiting lists rise and rise, getting up to a year now for some of my patients. We see that the numbers of doctors and nurses and beds, scanners, any kind of metric you like to look at, you compare us with our European neighbours, and it's dire. We're about 1/3 the number of doctors and nurses that we should have. We've depended for these years on being bailed out by people coming from overseas. Fantastic doctors and nurses have been prepared to come and help our NHS. And suddenly in the last few years, we've slammed the door in their faces. So we're really up against it now. The NHS is being underfunded, understaffed. And you've got to wonder why. Maybe they don't really want the NHS to succeed. And there's some wise words from Noam Chomsky, American, who described what happens here, that you take a public service, you underfund it, people get angry, and then you hand it over to private capital.
Yeah, thanks for that, and hopefully our viewers be educated by that, be well informed by that, but it can also, hopefully what you've said there resonates with their personal experience and that of their families, what's been happening. Certainly I know people that have been waiting a long time for consultations or operations. Which leads us on a bit to the issue of privatisation, as well as underfunding and cuts. There's been a shift towards privatisation, much as the Conservatives deny that and will continue to deny that. And I believe a lot of that was the doors were open to massive wide-scale privatisation from the Health and Social Care Act of 2012. And I mean, even recently, we read that the Oprah Rose, owned by Centene, a huge American health insurance corporation, have taken over 37 GP practices over 49 sites in London, meaning that Centene now owns roughly 70 GP surgeries across the country, making them the biggest GP network in the UK. They're a health insurance corporation from America, pretty staggering. So what's your view? That's just one example. I'm sure you could give a huge number of others. You mentioned NHS blood services that were sold off years ago. What do you see as the dangers? Is your experience that privatisation is now pretty wide scale and is going to get worse? And if so, what are the dangers of that, John?
Well, the dangers are plain to see. We've got Moore did a great film, which is probably available widely now, but comparing the American healthcare system with the European, and particularly the NHS. So the plain danger is, when we can see it in America, we don't have to, this isn't something we've made up, it's plain fact. The American healthcare system costs 3 times as much as the NHS, costs a fortune, more than Germany and France, and yet it delivers worse outcomes. And the reason it does is because there's a 40% chunk taken out as pure profit by these American corporations. That's not money that's going for operations, not paying for cataracts, not paying for hips or nurses' salaries. It's purely shareholder profit. And that's the way we're heading if we copy the American model. And the way they make those fat profits, and we've seen it, and we're starting to see it now, is they squeeze at both ends of provision. So they'll start knocking out high-cost procedures. Some of the new breakthrough cancer drugs, you'll find you can't get them. And they'll squeeze at the bottom end. And they'll say you can't have your varicose veins done or your hernia. You just got to carry on in pain. And they just squeeze at both ends and make it harder and harder. So poor old Americans, if they get ill, if they're lucky enough to be employed, they're okay. If someone in America gets cancer, loses their job, that's it. Bankruptcy, you lose your house. And do we want to go that way? I don't think so. But that is staring us in the face. These American firms, they're absolute sharks, and they're being attracted by the blood that's been spilled in the water by some of our politicians. It's, again, as I was saying before, it's a relentless thing. Sadly to say, Milburn and Hewitt were doing something like this 15 years ago. Lately, we've had Lansley, Hunt, and Hancock doing the same. They just keep, they'll swear blind they're not doing it, but they keep giving more contracts to Oprah Rose or Optum. And now Javid's in charge, and he's come from a merchant bank where he was paid £1,500 an hour to advise private healthcare companies how to make money. So we have a wolf in charge, and we need to be on our guard.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's very worrying, and I mean, probably most of our viewers are aware to some extent of how awful the American healthcare system is, and for us to be moving rapidly down that road is pretty appalling, pretty scary, really worrying. You know, maybe especially if you have elderly relatives, or if you have families, if you have children, you know, whoever you are, this is such a serious matter and such a concern. As you say, the American model's, you know, around 2.5 to 3 times more expensive per person, delivers terrible results. Tens of millions of people can't afford to have any access to healthcare whatsoever, to have health insurance. And for those that do have health insurance, the average cost now is £4,000, $5,000 per year. That's the average cost. On top of it, and that doesn't pay for everything. On top of which there are co-pays, there are deductibles, meaning, you know, a bit like we have insurance excesses, meaning that you have to pay for things, and certain illnesses people find are not covered. Once they fall ill with them, their insurance company says, oh no, we don't cover you for that. And as you say, bankruptcy through medical debt is through, you know, debts accrued from medical bills is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. What an appalling system, and the idea that we're heading that way ourselves is ludicrous and very, very worrying. So yeah, so you mentioned there, you mentioned about, you know, increases to waiting lists earlier on, and you know, people locally, they're concerned about access to their GP. They're concerned about, you know, getting to see a consultant, which seems to, the waiting list for that is longer and longer now. If they can get to see one, they're concerned about waiting list for operations, for, you know, for all sorts of things, whether it's cancer treatment, whether it's, you know, hip replacements, etc., etc. And an increasing number of treatments that are unavailable. I mean, you say about these American companies, they're, you know, they're concerned for their shareholders and their profits. And Centene in their 2018 annual report said they're withdrawing some services because they don't meet their profitability targets. That was all they were concerned with, not patient care, not the health of those they serve, but profitability targets. That's their #1 concern. And so they were withdrawing from certain contracts and things being available. So people are worried they'll get ill in the future and be told, yeah, the NHS doesn't cover that anymore. So how and why do you think those things are happening, Jon? And in your experience as a local GP, how has that change manifested itself for your patients over the last 10 years?
Well, yeah, picking up the examples you gave, yes, it's harder to get what's now classed as minor surgery is getting restricted. The high-cost cancer drugs are being restricted. So that's from the top and the bottom. And then from the sides, we're losing whole chunks entirely. So if you look at NHS dentistry or optician services, again, all used to be included. Now, when you go to the dentist, you go with your credit card, and it doesn't have to be that way. But from every direction, the NHS is under attack, and that's how it shows itself. So yeah, it's a real problem, and we can do something about it as citizens. It's not a done deal. The NHS, what I was saying at the beginning, it didn't start by accident. It started because people were absolutely committed to it. They got the vision. They become active, engaged citizens, and they fought for it. They fought a war for it, and they won the peace. Our forefathers did it. We can't just relax. We have to do the same. I heard Tony Benn say years ago, every kind of generation has to refight the same battles. And here we are. It's our battle now. This is baton has been handed to us. We have to carry it on for our children and grandchildren. And the way we do it is by being engaged citizens. Find out about it, read about it, go on the comment columns on social media, stand up for the NHS, write letters, write to the MP when they're making the cuts, when they say they're going to cut hospitals write about it. They get they have to come back to elections, and so finally, when we come to elections, vote for candidates that support the NHS.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great place to end, and really pleased that you've indicated there how that it's up to all of us. It's up to all of us to carry that torch for future generations and to do our utmost to save our NHS before it's gone. So thank you. Thanks for that stirring message, Jon. And thanks for the work you do and have done for so many years in Weymouth, and for standing up for our NHS and for the health of our local people. So thank you so much for spending that time talking with us today.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. And I'll end with the words of Bevan, the founder. The NHS will last as long as there are folk left with the faith to fight for it.
That was wonderful.
Wow. Yeah, fascinating and so important that people are knowledgeable about what's actually happening to our NHS, and hopefully people will be involved in the fight to save it before it's gone, and it is going. And people say, really, are the Conservatives really going to do this to our NHS? As we said in the interview, death by 1,000 cuts. Slowly, bit by bit, it disappears, and then before you know it, it's gone. So yeah, when people say, really, are they really doing it? These people have written books on how to privatise and destroy our NHS. They've written books on it. The people in charge of it now, the people in this Conservative cabinet now, have written books on how to privatise and destroy our NHS. So you better believe it, folks. Okay, so moving on, we're talking. You've got a picture behind you. Who's that, Jace? Tell us. Why is that behind you?
James Douglas Morrison, Jim Morrison, lead singer of the Doors. This Saturday is the 50th anniversary of his death in Paris in 1971. So I thought we'd one of our topics this week, we'd have a look back at Jim's life and the Doors, and have a quick chat about him. Celebrate his life if you like, but also the fact that it's 50 years. It's such an iconic rock music character. Died, and of course he died at the same time, relatively same time, within a sort of a 9-month time span between Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin, because Jim apparently famously once said, first there was Jimmy, then there's Janis, and then you're talking to number 3. So he predicted, because of his lifestyle, he predicted his death would be while he was young. And of course, it started off in around that time, the 27 Club, because of the number of celebrities, especially rock stars, who have died at the age of 27. People like Kurt Cobain, for example, as well.
Wow. Why is that? Do you think just a rock and roll drug-taking lifestyle, living life on the edge?
It's living life on the edge, yeah. And I think possibly, if you're suffering from mental health issues, maybe that have been brought on by heavy drug use, it's possible that in a few of the cases, only possible, that joining the 27 Club is something that people aspire to. If you don't see your life going anywhere, if you don't see the values that you feel to be believed to be important are being upheld around you within the world in which you live, and you want to clock off, then I think there are instances where people have decided, I'm 27, just like Jim, Janis, Jimmy, etc. Goodbye and good night. Which is very sad, but at the same time, I think it's exploited by record companies. I think, if you look at the number of artists who died young, and the sales of their music have gone through the roof, been extraordinary as a direct result of their deaths. It goes back through, as I say, through musical history. If you look back, for example, to the months after John Lennon died, he died obviously in December 1980, but in January, February, March of '81, record sales, not only Double Fantasy, obviously the album that he brought out just before his death, but you know, all those albums and the Beatles stuff dominated the charts. But bringing us back to you know, the Doors, they formed in 1965, a collection of guys who'd been to LA art school or film school, or friends of friends. In 1965, they formed Jim and Ray Manzarek, who was the keyboardist, coming together again on the beach after graduation and just saying, you know, what are you going to do now? And they started talking, and that was it, really. That sort of started it all off. And then the band were joined by Robbie Krieger on guitar and John Densmore, who was a jazz drummer. And the rest is history. But they only had a short life, you know, 6 years in effect. The last album, which they recorded at the latter end of 1970, which was LA Woman. And then Jim went off to Paris in the early part of 71, and of course, never came home. He's buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, which I visited in 1991. That was 30 years ago now. Yeah, and at the time, I'm not sure about now, but at the time, Père Lachaise Cemetery, because of the fact that people like Jim Morrison, Edith Piaf, Oscar Wilde, etc., were there, was the fourth biggest tourist attraction in France.
Good Lord.
And it's you know, I suppose we're all in some ways guilty of it, but it still obviously relates around, I think, our obsession, or many people's obsession with death, and not knowing what comes next, and especially if someone dies young. I think that just adds to their kudos, if you like, adds to the mystery that surrounds them. Yeah, well, we obviously, that's what we create, isn't it? And then when we read the biographies of all these different people, how many of them are 100% accurate? How many of them have bits and bobs put into them? I mean, it's a classic case, obviously, here with the Oliver Stone film that was released in 91 on the Doors. And it's about as accurate, if you like, as Bohemian Rhapsody is. You know, there's a whole range of fictitious moments, fictitious characters, events that occurred that were Hollywood. They weren't a documentary. They weren't about enlightening us. They were about principally entertaining us and get as many people to attend and watch the film as possible, and to maximize their revenue, which I think is a real shame, because people will walk away from these bios and they'll think they know what happened, but in fact, most of it, or certainly large parts of it, are fake, are false. But again, that's, you know, that's for another discussion about the nature of Hollywood and the nature of the way in which reality is constructed by corporations for us, so that we effectively live a lot of our lives as lies. But Jim saw it. I mean, you know, Jim despaired at the Vietnam War. He despaired at the American involvement. He despaired that his father was very high up in the US Navy, and in fact, he commanded a ship. He despaired at all these things, and it doesn't help, I think, if you haven't got a close relationship with your family, because you at some point in your life, especially when you are in despair, it can be your family that drags you out of it. And in this case, he didn't have that relationship for that to happen. So yeah.
And what are the things, Jason? I mean, you're obviously a huge fan. What are the things that you know, appealed to you most about the Doors, and you know, the legacy of Jim Morrison's music? Obviously, as you say, it was a short period of time, 6 years or so, that the music was created. What's special about it, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I think he's one of those people that you find particularly attractive when you're young, because it's not just the music. He was a poet. He read extensively. He was into, you know, the the French poet Arthur Rimbaud, people of Oscar Wilde, obviously, but he was very much into the existentialist philosophers, which I think when you're younger and you think, you know, the world's your oyster, you're more likely to find as the pathway maybe for your next step, for you yourself as an individual. You learn later, especially, you know, if you're intellectual and you go on to university or you go on to postgraduate studies and you study these types of subjects, you learn that it's only one side of the coin, you know, and there's parts of it that are quite significantly misguided. But certainly if you're young, that type of lifestyle on the edge is exciting. But he, of course, you know, lived his life on the edge permanently. You know, as Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane said, you know, anybody offered Jim a pill, he'd take it. You know, he wasn't one of these people who would walk down the street and say, in her words, no, thank you, no, thank you, yes, please. It was always yes, please, yes, please, yes, please. And of course, his big drug, his big dependency was alcohol. And again, I think, you know, for young people, when they're going through their teens and into their 20s, for a lot of them, they consume significant amounts of alcohol. So, you know, I really do think that there's that part of him. But of course, his was an illness, you know, addiction, alcoholism, it's an illness, but it wasn't recognized at the time in the late 1960s. It wasn't, you know, like it is now. He'd have probably, if he'd done all this 40, 50 years later, he'd have ended up in a clinic, probably or possibly, and might have lived a lot longer. But I think that burning bright and fading out quickly is an attractive thing for, as I say, especially within the way in which materialist, consumerist culture that we've had in place for the last half a century.
Yeah. And would you describe, you mentioned his, you know, opposition to the Vietnam War, would you describe him as an anti-establishment figure, and the lyrics of Doors songs fall into that kind of category?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Yeah. There's one of the very first environmental songs that pointed out what humans were doing, Ship of Fools. I think it's on Morrison Hotel. But, you know, you're talking about 1968, 69. You know, they were ahead of their time. There's no doubt about it. The fusion of blues, rock, jazz in the Doors songs. And anybody obviously who's seen Apocalypse Now would know the end, which is, you know, momentous part of that film in terms of the build-up to the tensions in the early part of the film. And so, yeah, they've got a lot of songs that Break On Through, for example, was very much, you know, about LSD. You know, the Doors themselves got their name from the William Blake line, if the doors of perception are cleansed, men sick will see things as they truly are, infinite. So it was that understanding of that existentialist philosophy that, you know, you can see a lot more if you can open up your mind to allow your senses to have much more scope, if you like, for attaching themselves to reality. Yeah, so there's, you know, there's so many songs that the Doors wrote that if you just sit and listen to that particular song and what he's singing about, what the band are trying to get across, and obviously the most famous one is Light My Fire, which, you know, most people have heard about. But, you know, like Jim said, I got sick and fed up of playing that song. Even though he didn't write the song, Robbie Krieger wrote the song. You got sick of it because you'd be at a concert and all you'd hear from the people in the darkness, you know, the audience was, play Light My Fire, play Light My Fire. And I suppose if you are of that type of, you know, that type of mentality, personality, where you're pushing back, there comes a point where you push back against the audience as well and say, you know, I'm not playing Light My Fire anymore. Like Radiohead would stop playing Creep, for example. They just got sick and fed up with it. So you want to play the other stuff. You know, there's loads of other stuff in your repertoire that you adore and you love that you want your audiences to hear, and not the same old songs every night.
I was thinking of, for some reason, I was thinking of great artists from centuries ago, painting in front of it, you know, and they go through different periods. You know, these great painters, and I was imagining them creating artwork in front of an audience who were calling out for, do some cubism, show us your cubism.
Yeah.
No, I've moved on. Anyway, and you know, for any young listeners who aren't aware of the Doors, you know, a number of albums that you know that you'd recommend, and the kind of feel of them. How would you describe that?
I mean, the problem is, I think, is often at this day and age, you're probably better off listening to, you know, the compilations. Seriously, listen to the compilations, because you will have all the tracks that, or some of the tracks that I've heard that one before. I've heard that one before. And then you think, okay, well, I'll look further into the repertoire. It's not like the old days where you used to go around to your friends' bedrooms. It was vinyl. They just got the new album in and they put it on, and you'd sit there and you smoke weed all night, and you'd come away thinking, you know, that's the best thing since whatever. So you've got the early stuff. You've got the eponymous album, The Doors, and you go into Strange Days. And then you go through the repertoire where the Soft Parade, for example, where they started to experiment more with a bit of this sort of band sound, you know, trumpets, excuse me, and different instruments. And then they came back in line more with Waiting for the Sun and Morrison Hotel. And then they finished off with probably, you know, to finish off with an album, bearing in mind that the Doors with Jim didn't make anything after that, which is LA Woman, which is an absolutely classic, wonderful album. But if you want the end, it's on the Doors. If you want When the Music's Over, it's on Strange Days. So yeah, you know, it's if you like rock, blues, jazz, fusion, so to speak, and you like a serious edge, and you like musicians who aren't playing a game to get rich, they're doing it purely and solely because of the love of the music, especially, it has to be said, Jim and John Densmore, the drummer. Ray and Robbie were more, let's say, they're a bit looser, a bit more laissez-faire with their materialistic thing. You know, they were prepared, for example, to sell Light My Fire as a jingle for an advert. And it was Jim and John, especially Jim, who said, that's not why we formed this band, man. You know, if you're going to do that, I'm off. So that was, you know, that's where John and Jim were really quite similar. But it didn't create, maybe it created certain situations, but, you know, it didn't create anything that was a dynamic that was going to destroy the band. But it was certainly something that was there underneath the surface. Yeah. So
hopefully some young people, you know, any younger viewers that aren't already aware of the Doors, go and get yourself some of those albums, or as you say, maybe start off with a sort of compilation album of the best of the Doors.
Yeah. And read some of the biographies. I mean, just finishing off, we've got we at Doors Eye, we reviewed the last biography that was put out there, or the last one that I'm certainly aware of, which was by Mick Wall, back in 1916. A terrific book, and I personally reviewed it as well. So if you go to, you know, go on to Doors Eye and just put in the Doors, for example, and you have my fairly short review it was on the 4th of July as well. It was 5 years ago, so it was that would have been around the 45th anniversary of Jim's death. But yeah, you know, just go out there and check stuff out. You know, don't believe the hype, as they say, Tom. Always go and find out things for yourself, and always ask those questions and seek your own answers. Don't just allow people to say, oh, you know, he's a drunk, he was an addict, he was promiscuous. Yeah, there's millions of people like that, but don't write them off, because whatever those things are, those things are just parts of somebody's personality. They are not the whole person. The whole person is a far, far more complicated person. And we all deserve to be listened to and heard, as long as we've got something that's worth listening to.
Yeah, and isn't it great? You know, Morrison's obviously one of those, as you mentioned earlier, a poet. But if in life we take time to listen to people that have something to say, and that also say it in such a special way, you know, that's worth the time spent.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. And that's a brilliant place to finish off with Mr. Jim Morrison. Moving on to number 4 this week, there was a interview I did, another interview I've done with Clive Stafford Smith, and this time he's talking about some of the sort of peculiar cases that he's been involved with on death row and around the world, and as you can see for yourself, an extremely entertaining lesson. Hi Clive, welcome back to 10 by 6.
Hello, this threatening woman has just said we're being recorded.
Yeah, I think this is the 3rd or the 4th opportunity we've had to chat, and this week we're going to focus more on some of those interesting stories that I think you'd like to have maybe discussed beforehand, but we didn't have time, whether it's to do with women on death row or whether it's to do with just peculiar cases that that you've come across that maybe stand out a little bit from the others.
Oh, there are hundreds. I don't know, I could go on forever. So every case is peculiar in the sense that it's atypical and it's just unique. But there we go. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, cool. So in terms of women on death row, how do they experience it differently to men, if at all?
Well, I will say that when it comes to the death penalty and maybe prison, it's one of the few areas where chauvinism is good. Not, the very fact of chauvinism is not good, but because the legal system is innately sexist and genderist, it is much easier to get justice for women than it is for men. So you just look at the figures. There are 2,550 as of now people on death row in America, of whom 52 are women. And that tells you something. And it's not because actually women don't kill people. They do, sadly, but it's because the system treats them rather differently. And look, I've tried these cases with women, and it's people are just want to say, oh, little old lady couldn't possibly do that sort of nonsense. And in a way, however reprehensible those views may be, it works to the benefit of the prisoners.
Is there a similar situation? I mean, I don't know about obviously the numbers, but are there any females in Guantanamo?
No, that's all bearded men. Now, when you look at Guantanamo on the Euphrates, which is the equivalent, in Syria, the majority, well, there are roughly, depending on your estimate, a little over 70,000 people in those detention camps there. And the women outnumber the men vastly, but then the children outnumber the women. So you've got probably about, 60% of all the people there are children, and then 30% are women and 10% men. And that's a case where the tabloids have sort of tarred. I mean, it's one thing when the US opened Guantanamo Bay, at least it was, comprehensible that the 780 men there might be terrorists who were fighting in Afghanistan. It turned out to be monumentally wrong, but at least it was possible. When you come to the Guantanamo on the Euphrates, it's obviously impossible. I mean, the largest group by far are children, most of whom are infants, who in a civilized society we would presume conclusively to be innocent of anything, because they would be innocent. But instead, you have the British government is the worst. They're worse than the Americans by far, saying that these children should be kept in these awful camps because of the sins that are presumed upon their parents. And they're wrong about the parents and many times too, but they're certainly wrong about the children.
Why do you think that the likes of Priti Patel and repeated Home Secretaries in this country have taken the UK government to a much more extreme position than even the US?
Well, it's the politics of hatred, right? Each country has its hate groups. And in the US, we always had our hate group primarily to be young black men who we sentenced to death. We have other hate groups, but that was our number one. The Australians, intriguingly, make asylum seekers their number one hate group. And Priti Patel is sort of trying to catch up there. The British have had their own groups. We've been very hateful of immigrants for a long time. As if, it's always interesting to me when you think about the sheer numbers of asylum seekers. How many asylum seekers have you ever met?
Asylum seekers, I've known one fairly closely. But other than that, I wouldn't know them. They haven't expressed to me that they're obviously seeking asylum.
Well, it's a very, very small number in the whole of Britain. And, it's sort of like hating the people on death row. You are more likely, according to Prince Charles, to meet a space alien than you are to meet someone on death row or an asylum seeker. There's 5% of the country think they've met a space alien. They're all obviously mad, but that includes our dear Prince. But there's such a tiny number of people who are asylum seekers in this country that the overwhelming majority have never met one. And yet we're encouraged by Priti Patel to hate them passionately, like they're destroying our country. And it's all about hatred. It's all about politicians, when faced with the difficult job of governing, say to themselves, well, we can either, do our job and work hard, and it won't be easy to create utopia, or otherwise we can just tell the people of Britain that if they hate a few asylum seekers, it's all their fault. If they want to get out of Europe, and we say everything is the fault of the Europeans, then that's a way of distracting the population from the truth, which is that these politicians are worthless. And that's what Priti Patel does, is the politics of hatred, and it's one that I'm afraid I despise.
Yes. The two things come to me there. Firstly, you have to sympathise with a particular political ideology in order for you to follow through on that hate and division.
You really don't. I mean, there are people, I'm afraid, the level of hatred. If you want to talk about the people we really, really hate in Britain, who are they?
When you say we, you mean?
I mean, every British person, even the Guardian readers, hate them.
Brown terrorists. I mean, even the Guardian readers, that's pushing it, because where is the Guardian right now in terms of its stance on anything? But let's say the homeless, let's say rapists.
No, it's not them. It's not them. It's pedophiles. That's the group that everybody hates.
I was getting there.
Yeah, I'm glad you're getting there. But it's just so pathetic. I've represented a number of pedophiles, and it's always interesting to ask people, hey, who here would choose to be a pedophile? And of course, no one does. And of course, if we accept the term mental illness, which I don't really like, obviously someone who is a pedophile suffers from a disorder. It's not something they chose. And yet for us to hate them does two things. One is it reflects how pathetic we are. But second, it makes the world dangerous for children. Because one of the things that got me in New Orleans was when people would move into our neighborhood and they had to do that ridiculous thing of declaring that they're a sex offender in your neighborhood and sending you a postcard. What's that going to do? The first thing that happens is a bunch of vigilantes go around to their house and throw bricks through their window. That then drives those people underground. You will remember the News of the World, of course, didn't know the difference between a pedophile and a pediatrician. So they did that for some poor doctor in Wales. But what that does, if you are a pedophile, is drive you underground, get you away from the people who are trying to help you. and then you reoffend and some other poor child suffers. So those policies are so counterproductive as well as hateful that it's just very sad. And Priti Patel is the saddest of them all. I was chastised by someone recently when I tweeted some slightly rude tweet about Priti Patel, and I misspelt her name. And this woman got onto me, but she said she had a block on anything that mentions the name Priti Patel. She doesn't like it to come across her Twitter. And I'd somehow got around it by misspelling it. And she was very upset that I'd reminded her that Priti Patel exists.
How would you have dealt with, as a lawyer, how would you have dealt with somebody like, let's say, Jimmy Savile, if we'd had the death penalty in this country? What would your approach have been, or what would your philosophy be?
It's very hard to say, in the sense that I didn't know Jimmy Savile, and
fair enough.
You know, if you just read the papers, you'll have a view about him. But the truth is, something's going on with someone like that. And in my experience, it takes a lot of work to figure those things out. You know, one of the people I represented who was a notorious pedophile in America, it took me 10 years to get his trust enough that he would tell me what was really happening, to the best he could imagine it. And you know, he wasn't very good at that either. So it's really hard. And I'm loath to judge people like Jimmy Savile based on what the papers publish.
Of course. I mean, and there's been a lot of speculation that someone like Jimmy Savile, for example, is the tip of the iceberg, but because he was so close to the establishment, and because so many people in and around the establishment possibly are, let's say, responsible for similar crimes.
Well, I wouldn't get into a massive conspiracy theory, but on the other hand, and I don't know enough about Jimmy Savile's background, that he didn't have the same as me, but I went to a school where my parents paid for all of us to be sexually abused. And, you know, that was just the nature of private boarding schools. And, you know, that's awful, right? But, and I'm not saying that it was systematic amongst all teachers, of course it wasn't. But there were certain people who were attracted to that sort of job for their own reasons. And, you know, that's really terribly sad. But the solution to that is not to hate everyone. The solution is to, you know, to try to work out what's going on there. And no doubt, as with everyone, that, you know, the people who did that, like most of my clients who became sex abusers, had obviously been abused. That's the cycle of violence, and it's tragic.
Do you ever consider how is it that you ended up, having been to a public school and experienced the things that you did, how you came to be where you are, yet a lot of your classmates, so to speak, ended up going in a completely different direction? And do you think it's in part, at least, as a result of the experiences that you had?
Oh, it's hugely as a result of my father being bipolar and being much hated. But also, you know, the problem is this, and the charity that I've set up recently is about helping young people avoid the pressure of society to do something pointless with their lives. And one thing, unless you're my father who believed in reincarnation, is you've only got one chance in life, and you're going through it for the first time as a young person, whereas life has been around for a long time. And so I watched this so much in a very simple way with people in law school with me. When I started at Columbia, there were 313 people in the class, and a sizable minority wanted to go into human rightsy stuff. So, you know, let's say there were 50 of them. And through the 3 years of law school, I watched them falling away. And it was largely because there were these pressures where first the law school had a student loan program where, you know, you'd come out of law school with $100,000 in student loans and you had to pay them back. Well, that's an enormous pressure on these people to go and get a pointless corporate job. then once they did go to a corporate law firm in the summer, the corporate law firm was all set up to give you great experiences in the summer because they were sucking you in. So you saw a side of it that just wasn't real. Then at the time, though, to fit in there, you had to wear the right suits, you had to go to the right restaurants and all that sort of thing. So you end up getting yourself into another structure of life that's very expensive. And then you're trying to buy a flat in New York or whatever, and you get a mortgage and whatever. And you get all these debts racked up, and you've now found yourself pushed into a lifestyle that you really didn't want to do. And I would see these friends of mine years later, and they're pretty unhappy, even though they were quite rich, because they had been osmotically forced into a life that they didn't want to do, that was complemented by fear of not having healthcare, fear of this, fear of that. And so they'd made all these dreadfully bad decisions. And that's what afflicts all young people at some level. And it's what we need to help them to avoid.
It sounds to me like a cage within a cage within a cage, and it doesn't matter where you are within society, you're trapped in.
Well, it's easy to keep out of it. You just need to know to. And I was terribly lucky because I was a young and naive and very stupid male. Maybe that's all redundant. I just have to say young male. And I was really lucky to have got out of that by various means. But it's quite simple looking back on it. There are decisions you can make that are actually very simple. And this is what we need to help the young people of today to do, because it's in our interest. We want these great young people to do fantastic things and not go work for some pointless corporation. And so that's the challenge now. I love doing it. It's great fun helping to coach people to do the right choices. I might be able to even rescue you. I don't know. I doubt it. It's hopeless, right? Is it a hopeless cause?
I'm 54, so I don't know what the strategies
you're
are.
A juvenile at heart, sure.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Next
Forever.
week, I'm going to be 62, going on 14.
Too right, definitely. And that's actually the approach we should have. You've got an interesting, you mentioned to me before, you've got an interesting case around, if I use the trigger word, cunnilingus.
You would. No, look, I tell this story only because it amuses me, but also because this is the legal system that deals with my death row clients. And, you know, it's not just the American system that's mad, the British one is too, but it was quite fun. I'll tell you the story just because you're a pervert and you want to hear it. It was one summer when I was working in Atlanta doing death cases, and I had some students and I wanted to keep them entertained. And I get this call from this guy, Jim Mosley, who was in prison doing 5 years at hard labor for what he said was consensual oral sex with his wife. And I said, yeah, pull the other one. But I went down to see him just because it was sort of too much to resist, right? And it turns out that Jim was a naval veteran who had been married to this woman who was having an affair with a lawyer. And she wanted to break up from Jim, but she wanted custody of the kids. And her boyfriend, the lawyer, said, well, you know, if you get him arrested, you'll get custody. So she enticed him in for this last night of lust, where, you know, she had him tie her up on the bed and do these heinous acts to her. And then she accused him of rape. But her sister came forward and said, it's all bullshit. This woman's just trying to get the kids. But in the meantime, Jim had confessed that he had indeed committed this heinous act. You call it cunnilingus. I called it tonguelingus prohibitum, because it sounded like it was Latin. It was just something I'd made up, prohibited use of the tongue. And the prosecutors thought that was a real Latin phrase because I was a pompous English person. At any rate, Jim had been convicted on this. And, you know, he told me that when he first went, he was sent to a maximum security prison. He was convicted of consensual oral sex, which was a criminal offense. Everything but the missionary position between consenting married adults was a criminal offense in Georgia. And the reason for that was that law was passed when, do you reckon? When did that law come into force?
1790.
1972. And the reason it was 1972 is in the 70s, the Equal Protection Clause said that you have to treat gay people the same as straight people. So the legislators in Georgia were confronted with the fact that they either had to legalize sodomy between gay people, God forbid, or they had to criminalize everything for everyone. And because, as Mark Twain said, 50% of Americans practice what they condemn and the other 50% condemn what they practice.
Brilliant.
And they're all hypocrites. They made it illegal for everyone, right? So that's why Jim was convicted of this vicious offense, because the jury didn't believe it was non-consensual, and no one believed that. But they did believe that he'd had oral sex with his soon-to-be ex-wife because he confessed to it. And so he's in prison, and he's telling me the maximum security prison, this is qualified as a dreadful sex offense. And he said when he first got there and he said he was there for having oral sex with his wife, everyone laughed at him. So he just started admitting to murder because it was just less embarrassing. And it was actually very hard to talk to Jim without having dreadful puns. And I got through talking to him and I said, Jim, I'll get you off by the end of the day. So I went back to my office and I called Michael Bowers, who was then the Attorney General. And he ironically went down for a sex offense himself later. But anyway, it was Bowers versus Hardwick was the case in which the US Supreme Court had said that it was constitutional to criminalize this. So I told him, you know, Michael, you won't find anyone who will take your position, so to speak, on this case. And he put the whole death squad on it, 6 lawyers on the death squad. And I knew them all quite well. And I knew that 2 of them were married heterosexual, 2 were unmarried heterosexual, and 2 were lesbian. And so, you know, we had the whole lot, right? So then it was a matter of how hypocritical these people were going to be. So I moved to disqualify them unless they'd swear in public that they'd never committed this criminal offense themselves, which we got that on the front page of the Atlanta Constitution because, you know, it's just the whole thing's silly, right? And you can't take these people seriously or they take themselves seriously. So then I sat around writing the brief where I called it Tunnelingus Prohibitum. I accused the state of cunning linguistics in their effort to justify this heinous crime. And then we had a protected First Amendment claim, which was that this was a protected form of oral expression under the First Amendment free speech. We had a section under the 8th Amendment, which is proportionality, where interestingly, if you take necrophilia, bestiality, and public indecency and run all 3 of those offenses consecutive, you get more time in prison for doing it with your spouse in the privacy of your bedroom than you do if you do it with a dead horse in the middle of the courthouse square. And if you wait until your spouse is dead, it's just necrophilia, you get half as much time in prison as while he or she is still alive. So it went on and on and on like that. You could get 20 years for your first offense of oral sex. So we came to have a hearing and I wanted some expert witnesses. So I subpoenaed Kim Bassinger because she had given an interview in Red Book magazine where she was asked, she'd bought this little village in Georgia called Brazelton. And she'd asked why she'd bought it. Was it where she first kissed a boy if it was so romantic? And she said, no, that's where I first had oral sex. So I thought she'd be a good expert witness. But her lawyers moved to intervene and quash the subpoena because obviously she'd be confessing to a criminal offense and she has the right to remain silent. I got a sex therapist to come and testify about how experimenting with different forms of sexuality was good for people. But then we got to the question about, would you, doctor, tell people to do this? And he had to take the 5th Amendment because that's solicitation to commit a felony. And all of this was in front of a judge who rather fancied himself. He was quite a nice chap. And he just took it in the right spirit. And he turned to Mary Beth Westmoreland, the prosecutor, and said, "Ms. Westmoreland, would you like oral argument?" And it just went on like that. And, you know, yeah, we won. We got the case tossed out. And I like to say and claim that now, you know, oral sex is legal for you in America. And that's thanks to me. I want you to know that. So I just want you to understand you have a lot to thank me for. But, you know, the sad truth of this was that Jim ended up having a mental breakdown because he was an all-American guy who had fought for his country and for all things American. And he believed in the American way. And his whole world collapsed when this happened. And, you know, I went from there. And of course, this statute was primarily aimed at gay people. And I ended up representing a number of gay guys who were done for that, including a British cameraman, photographer, who had taken pictures of himself in flagrante delicto, and they gave him 16 years in prison when they stole these pictures from his house. Someone did. And so, you know, this was just an incredibly pernicious thing. And while it was pretty funny as we were beating up on the government over it, nonetheless, it was a reflection of the deranged nature of the American legal system, which is a reflection of the deranged nature of the British system.
So is Georgia now?
Does me telling you the whole oral sex story make you happy?
Is Georgia now overturned? You're saying Georgia's now overturned the oral sex part?
No, the whole United States has now, because that case then went on. And then there was a case called Lawrence versus Texas, where finally the US Supreme Court overturned Bowers versus Hardwick and said, no, actually, you just can't criminalize that sort of thing.
Right. And in terms of your client, say he had a mental breakdown, what happened in relation to the custody of his children?
Well, I mean, by then, the trouble was he'd done a year in prison by the time we got him out. And, or maybe longer, I think it was 18 months. And it had totally ruined his life. And then he ended up having to get mental health treatment. And I don't know, I mean, he'd lost custody of the kids by then. And I don't know what became of them. That wasn't my, my area.
So there's that domino effect, isn't it? You know, on the one hand, you have a ridiculous piece of legislation, but then the impact of that piece of legislation goes all the way down the line, and it can be so ruinous.
Yeah.
It's a sad indictment. Thank you so much, Clive, for coming on Turn by Six again.
Very good. My pleasure.
Again, an absolute pleasure from our end as well, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Okay, very good. See you later. Bye.
Bye. Then a fascinating discussion with Clive, and I really look forward to our bi-weekly or fortnightly, I should say, sorry, our fortnightly chats, because he's just such an interesting person and so much to offer in terms of our understanding of what's going on in the different parts of the world, but certainly in terms of something like death row and Guantanamo and some of the cases he's seen. You know, most of us, the vast majority of us, never even imagine what it must be like. So for people like Clive to bring it to us, it's terrific. The next topic, Tom, is I suppose it's something that's been buzzing around my head for quite a while now, is the way in which we are manipulated by certain companies into believing that we are consuming ethical products, when in fact the people who are providing those products are far from being ethical. And it's really scary that there isn't even this area of our lives that we can say, okay, you know, I want to become a vegan. Right, I should become a vegan. I want to eat, let's say, Linda McCartney. So you go and buy Linda McCartney products, expecting that the people who produce those products are doing absolutely everything that they can in order to make this planet more sustainable or more habitable. And then you find out that this simply isn't the case. And it just becomes another piece of fakery that's added to the already existing long list that makes up our existence. I think it's just it's sad as much as anything.
It is, and I mean we're being conned. It's a real example of that. We use the phrase jumping on the bandwagon. What we're seeing is companies exploiting the consumers' desire to buy ethical products in various forms, and repackage companies that don't operate in an ethical way at all in terms of animal welfare, in terms of the environment, etc. But repackaging products to pretend that they're all green or all ethical, when really we discover they're not. So yeah, it's the consumers are being conned over and over again.
Yeah, I'm just want to sort of take us down to start off with the Linda McCartney, because I suppose if you want to put a label on me, I'm a pescatarian. I don't eat any meat whatsoever apart from fish, and we eat fish very sparingly. And the reason I eat fish is because I was quite ill many years ago, and one of the things that a couple of doctors said to me at the time, said, it's all very well being vegetarian, but one meat, if you like, that you do need to consume because the body does value it by far more than any of the others is fish. That's okay, so this explains that. But the rest of my lifestyle is to eat plant-based, fruit-based products. And we do. I mean, I do enjoy some of the Linda McCartney products, and then to find out that they were bought out by the Hain Celestial Group. Okay, well, I didn't know that. Fine. And then you look into the detail behind that particular organization, and sometimes you wish you didn't know these things, because it leaves you in a quandary, doesn't it? If you're trying to attain a diet that obviously, yes, hopefully is more healthy for you, but at the same time it's giving something back to the planet. Bearing in mind we do have to consume to create energy in order to exist. And then you find something out like this, and you say, well, where do I go from here? If I can just read through this one example, and people can go on to Dorsai and they can read the other examples for themselves. Linda McCartney is a pioneer of vegan and vegetarian products, but its owner, Hain Celestial, sells poultry and other meat-based products. The company appears to use factory farm meat across a wide range of products. Hain Celestial also scores worse in a number of our ratings, including climate change, environmental reporting, supply chain management, and likely use of environmental reporting. Despite having a turnover of more than 1 billion, the company is yet to report on its emissions or set a target for emission restrictions in line with international targets. So, I want to see that the people who sell, for example, in this instance, Linda McCartney, as I said before, are going out of their way to try and produce a product and to sell the whole portfolio of products that fall in line with an extremely ethical standard. And then I find out, actually, they don't give a stuff about most of those ethical standards. It's just part of a portfolio. We've talked about this before. It's part of a portfolio to make them look good. But it's all about appearance, and it's not about substance. And as I say, people, please go on to the article themselves and find out for themselves. And probably be extremely surprised at some of the products that they thought they were buying ethically aren't.
Yeah. And like you say, a portfolio of products that this overarching corporation holds, and quite possibly for some of these corporations, they're they know they're being criticised for their unethical approach to things, and they consciously go, well, buy up a you know, a producer of vegan products, and we can add that to our portfolio and claim some sort of ethical approach to what we're doing. We can state that in our annual report to our shareholders that we're doing a good job, and hiding the reality. And what we're seeing, of course, is this buying up of smaller companies by ever bigger companies and corporations, multinational corporations, ultimately, that own the vast majority of companies. So this is what's happening as a part of late stage capitalism, is that, you know, there's no kind of mum and pop stores anymore. They've all been bought up, you know, by the big supermarkets. There's no small food brands anymore. They've all been bought up. There's no small entertainment producers of entertainment anymore. They've all been bought up by Sony or Times Warner or whatever, you know. So they all get bought up. They retain, usually in most circumstances, they retain their own identity, and part of that is part of the part of conning the public, that they're buying a product from a small company. But really, you know, they're all owned by most things now, whether it's food products, whether it's electrical items, whether it's entertainment that we consume, owned by these enormous multinational corporations who act very unethically in terms of often how they treat their workers, in terms of how they act environmentally, the effect they have on our environment, and in terms of, you know, food standards and so on and so forth. And for all of them, it's about the bottom line. It's not about acting ethically. It's just about making as much profit as possible for their shareholders. And we're being conned. I mean, I was shocked to read that, you know, Linda McCartney. Wow, you know, I just assumed that that's still smallish Linda McCartney company by a bigger, very company that acts very unethically when it comes to animal welfare. You know, just shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking.
And just to finish off as well, the way in which these supermarkets, when you go down the aisles and you're looking for healthy food, and the product placement in relation to sugary foods or foods with high numbers of numbers aimed at children or whatever, you know, it completely defeats the purpose to have all of these health food products and then attached alongside them high in salt, high in sugar, high in toxic chemicals, to be fair. So what I would make can I just make a request? Can I just make a request? Sorry, yeah, sorry. Can I just make a request to our viewers? You know, if you find anything out there that, you know, people should know about, whatever it might be, whether it's to do with you know, food, or what to do with any aspect of their life, if you find out anything that you think people should know about, don't just stick it as a post on social media, if you're on social media, because it slips down really, really quickly and people forget about it. Put the evidence, the information together. It can be short as you like, you know, as long as it's got the substance, or it can be longer, and submit to the Dorset Eye, and we'll publish it and we'll get it out there, and you can get it out there, and it'll be out there forever, as opposed to being disposed of by the algorithms on social media, you know, as I say, really quickly. And we can get people to understand, so it informs them, because in a democracy, you need to be informed. If you're going to make decisions, they have to be enlightened decisions. There's no point responding to lies and half-truths and fake, because the outcome will be a response, we know, will be determined by that. So let's share this information and get it out there and enlighten people.
Absolutely, Jace. Yeah. Encourage people to do that. And I just wanted to pick up on something you said there about, you know, the availability of junk food, essentially the stuff that's really bad for us, rises in obesity, especially childhood obesity, and you know, the psychological game that supermarkets play with us. Eddie Izzard, the comedian, talked about how most supermarkets have fresh fruit and veg as the first thing that you come to. So you go in and everything looks fresh and healthy. And you, as Eddie Izzard said, you think, I will do well here. But you go along to all the other aisles, on the end of the aisles, all the deals, all the buy one get one free, the bog offs and the you know 3 for the price of 2 and whatever. It's all the crisps and the cake and the chocolate and the you know the high fat, high sugar, high salt junk food content that's reduced and that's cheapest, that's on the end of the aisle displays that catch our attention, that's on offer. And we can't resist an offer, and things look cheap, we grab it. I'm as guilty as anyone for doing that, and then we wonder why you know we're suffering with massive problems with obesity, diabetes, you know, preponderance of diabetes, and of course they've had this problem in America for a long time. A large proportion of the population are obese. And it's becoming more of a problem here, and also part of that is to do with the preponderance of high fructose corn syrup, which is like a version of sugar, which is very fattening and is found in everything, particularly soft drinks, fizzy drinks. You know, one of the worst things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, but the supermarkets con us, really, making us think, oh, this is a healthy place, and really what they're encouraging us to buy the most is the junk.
Yes. Yeah. And why? Because a lot of the stuff that they put in the junk food helps us to make ourselves feel better for a very, very, very short space of time, but it gives us that instant gratification. Now, what is it about our lives on a day-to-day basis that requires so much injection of instant gratification? It suggests to me that our lives are generally miserable, stressed out, largely substanceless, that we have to go and get this quick fix so often. And that's scary as well. Why not just make our lives different? Why not make our lives more empowered, freer, get us out of this cage, and then we won't spend all our lives being addicted to salt, sugar, and these chemicals.
You're right. I mean, when you're working for the man, you know, you need your sugar rush on a regular basis. Yeah. Okay,
so the last topic this week, this is a funny one, isn't it, Tom? Because it's social media is the problem here. Because, you know, before you could go into a pub and you could have a conversation about politics, and you'd have people who probably had too much beer or whatever, and they were slurring all their words and talking complete rubbish. But at least they were there face to face. Now with social media, we have what's become well known in the last few years as the Tory bot. And of course, you can say a little bit as well about the other side of the Atlantic, and how the Americans have also been encouraging this for certainly since Trump. But how you have all of these, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands, at least, if not millions, of fake accounts set up by people. And all their purpose is to go along under Boris Johnson or Donald Trump or Michael Gove or whatever, and to put this phrase, this positive comment that makes the wider public think, like you said, you know, you talked about before, oh, Boris Johnson's popular, Donald Trump is popular. Actually, their popularity is entirely manufactured by people who've been put into positions to manufacture them. So there's people working around the PR of Boris Johnson, and they're working around the PR of Donald Trump, etc., whose role entirely was to recruit, probably pay them. Certainly they had to be sympathetic, pretty nihilistic, in order to be setting up these accounts and then making out with fake names, everything else, that they were supportive of a particular politician. And we've come to a point now where you can't be supportive of a politician because of what they do. You have to be supportive. You're supportive of a politician because you truly believe that many people are too, and you might be missing something. You're not missing anything, apart from the fact you're being, again, completely and utterly conned.
So yes, so we're seeing some viewers may be aware of this, may have seen this highlighted via social media, but some may be completely oblivious and may even have been taken in by some of the bots. So as you say, for a few years now, the Conservatives have got these hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of bots, fake accounts, and they activate them, whether they're run by just Tory supporters or whether they're run from Conservative central office, or whether they're run by people from Deloitte. Who knows? And of course, Johnson has really recently been having his answers for question time, Prime Minister's question time. He's been having his answers written for him by the consultants at Deloitte.
Not just Boris Johnson. Not just Boris Johnson. Many Tory MPs.
Yeah, yeah. So when they stand at the dispatch box and quickly quip back with some amusing repartee, it's been written for them by these well-paid consultants at Deloitte. It's just ridiculous. But these bots are, a whole different. That's a whole different ball game, and there's something quite concerning in terms of democracy. Something quite concerning about thousands of fake accounts, all tweeting out or posting on Facebook more or less the identical same message. Things like, "Oh, Boris Johnson was very strong today at the dispatch box. He's really showing his leadership skills there," and they all, hundreds of people are tweeting that exact same words at the same time.
You're lucky that you've come across something with so many words in. The ones I tend to see are just all the way down the page of "brilliant Boris, brilliant Boris, brilliant Boris." It's like some deranged Dalek.
It is ridiculous. And I have to say, it's been a Tory trick for several years now, that they flood social media with positive messages from these bots, which say, as I say, that has a worrying context in terms of democracy and how the public are being conned regarding sort of political life and how popular politicians and their policies really are with the real public. But it's not just the Tories. I mean, Starmer's just started doing it as well. There's a recent example where suddenly these Labour bots were revealed, and hundreds of fake accounts saying positive stuff, the identical same words, positive stuff about Starmer.
It's no surprise.
It's shocking. I'm disgusted by that. It's shocking.
It's no surprise there that the Tory Party Mark II are copying Tory Party Mark I.
Yeah, it's sad. The other thing I wanted to pick up on, Jace, was the worst example of this. Sometimes it's just sycophantic stuff. Isn't Boris doing a great job? We love Boris, just ridiculous sycophantic stuff that they're all pumping out across social media, these thousands of fake accounts. But the most disgusting example was on the morning after the 2019 election, literally when the country was waking up, with the sickening knowledge that we were facing another 5 years at least of this murderous, vicious Tory government and their austerity, and knowing that, for a lot of us, knowing, as we heard earlier from Jon, how they're privatising and destroying our beloved and vital NHS. And on that morning, these thousands of fake accounts across the country tweeted and posted on Facebook more or less exactly the same wording that basically was about supporting our NHS, and they all sort of said, "I know someone who works at the hospital," or "I know a nurse," or "My friend's a doctor," or whatever, saying the big problem with the NHS is the missed appointments, people not turning up for appointments. And it quoted one or two figures. I don't know, 30% of GP appointments or hospital appointments are not kept, and that costs lots of money and so forth. And obviously that is an issue. There may be some element of truth to the fact that if people miss appointments with their GP or at the hospital, then there's a cost to that. It causes problems. It prevents other people having those appointments, etc., etc. But this was a deliberate, concerted attempt from Conservative central office to put instantly after the election, to put in the minds of the public that the big problem with the NHS is the public. The big problem with the NHS isn't this deliberate underfunding and cutting year after year after year for 11 years of our NHS. The slashing of numbers of GPs, doctors, nurses, hospital beds, services like mental health services, and the mass privatisation that's going on. That's not the problem at all. It's people not turning up for their appointments. What a cynical, despicable thing for them to have planned to do on the morning after the election, to send those, those thousands of bots tweeting that more or less identical message out. I find that sickening.
But you have to remember also that certainly since the 1980s, the Tory approach politically has been blame the victim. It's not about taking individual responsibility and saying, we've cocked up. It's not about saying the ideology that we follow, we've now found to be entirely flawed. The problem always, since the 1980s, since with Thatcher, lies with us. We are the problem. We have to sort ourselves out. If we don't fall in line with their vicious ideology, that's our fault, not theirs. But it's also, just finishing off as well, Tom, the date that you're talking about, the day after the 2019 election, Friday the 13th. And every day is Friday the 13th with the Tories.
Yeah.
Right. Episode 10, come to a conclusion.
Yeah. And was there something of a training video?
Oh, yes. I'm very
Tory bots. We were going to
right. I think we should finish off. We won't have a lovely this week because I think this will be the lovely. So for anybody, this is a satirical, if you like, look at the Tory bot, and as you can see from this article, there's just some examples of how it works. But this is beautiful. This is so lovely. So yeah, we'll finish off with this video, and I'll see you next week, Tom.
Thanks, Jay. See you next week. Thanks for watching, everyone. Enjoy this.
Hey, it's Simon at Conservative Party HQ. Yeah, I've just taken delivery of a Tory bot. It's Minister 2.4.4. Yeah, I'm about to install the updates. The OS, Bullingdon 3.1. Listen, stupid question. How do I turn him on? I wondered what that was. I thought it was a free gift. Okay, thanks very much. Oh, excellent. That works well. Tory bot, enter stance for public speaking. Sort that finger out. Widen those a little. Tory bot, enter diagnostic mode.
Running self-diagnostic. No faults found.
Great, that seems to be working. Tory bot, something we did cost thousands of lives. Response?
It's a human tragedy. Unacceptable. We will launch an inquiry.
No. Let's try that again. Tory bot, something we did cost thousands of lives. Response?
Proud of our record. Big success. We did the right things.
Much better. Okay. Check current affairs settings. Tory bot, statues of slave traders. Opinion?
They should be taken down. A relic from the past, outdated icons, no longer valid.
Dearie me, when was this updated? Tory bot, statues of slave traders. Opinion?
Vandalism by extreme left-wing anarchists. Why couldn't they write a strongly worded petition to their local council? Setup, 70% complete.
Okay, getting there. Tory bot, check visual field.
Currently unable to drive to Barnard Castle.
Okay, we'll do that later. Tory bot, evaluate Prime Minister.
Theresa May is providing strong and stable leadership. Chaos with Ed Miliband. Chaos at Bacon Sandwich.
Dearie me. Programme mode. Update Prime Minister to Boris Johnson. Okay, let's try again. Tory bot, evaluate Prime Minister.
Boris Johnson. Strong. Churchillian. I back him 100%.
All right, yes, well, we'll put a 2-week time limit on that, I think. Excellent. Well, that's all done. Tory bot, any errors to report?
I feel no emotion.
That's perfectly normal.
Warning. Equality module not installed.
You won't be needing that.
Warning. Compassion module not installed.
Tory Bot, power off.